Imagine a world without cities, without technology, without even the simple comfort of fire. Imagine waking each morning not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the cries of wild beasts echoing across endless plains, where survival was not a choice but a constant battle against hunger, weather, and predators. This was the world of early humans, millions of years ago. A world where every day was uncertain, every meal was a struggle, and every step carried the risk of death. Yet it was in this harsh and unforgiving landscape that our ancestors found ways to endure, to adapt, and ultimately, to shape the story of mankind. Life millions of years ago was raw and fragile. Humans were not the powerful beings we imagine today, ruling over nature with machines and technology. Back then, we were small, vulnerable, and very much at the mercy of our surroundings. Imagine standing barefoot on cold earth, your skin exposed to burning sun or freezing winds, with no house to protect you, no tools to defend you, and no supermarket filled with food. Hunger gnawed at the belly day and night, and danger lurked in every shadow. Lions, leopards, giant birds of prey, and even other humans could become deadly threats. In this world, the only way to survive was to learn the language of the land, when to move, what to eat, where to hide, and how to fight. Food was the first and greatest challenge. Our earliest ancestors were not hunters at first. They were gatherers, scavengers, opportunists. They ate what they could find, wild fruits hanging from trees, bitter roots dug from the soil, nuts cracked open with stones, and leaves that did not poison the stomach. Often, they followed the paths of larger predators and waited for the chance to snatch what remained of a kill. Imagine a group of early humans, skinny and desperate, watching from a distance as a pack of hyenas ripped apart the flesh of a wildebeest. Once the animals left, these humans would rush forward, cutting with sharp stones, pulling whatever scraps of meat they could find, even breaking bones to suck the marrow that offered precious fat and energy. But food was not always enough, and hunger was a relentless enemy. There were times of plenty, when fruits ripened and rivers swelled with fish, but there were also times of drought, when the land cracked and thirst burned like fire in the throat. In those days, to find water meant to live, and to lose it meant death. Early humans followed animal tracks to hidden springs, or dug into dry riverbeds in the hope of finding moisture deep below. They learned to listen to the sounds of birds circling above waterholes, to smell the air for the faint scent of rain. These instincts were survival tools, passed down not by books or teachers, but by necessity. Shelter was another constant struggle. Our ancestors did not have houses of stone and wood. They had caves when they were lucky, or simple huts made from branches, leaves, and mud. In storms, they huddled together beneath rocks. In the cold, they curled against one another, their bodies sharing warmth like fragile flames in the darkness. Imagine lying awake at night in such a shelter, hearing the growls of predators moving outside, the rustling of snakes in the grass, the calls of night creatures. The fear never ended, but it made them sharper, teaching them to stay alert, to guard their groups, to protect their young. Family and community were the center of early human survival. Alone, a human had little chance. But together, in small groups, they stood stronger. Men, women, and children each played a role. Some searched for food, others kept watch, while the strongest defended against predators. Children learned by watching, imitating their parents as they dug for roots or shaped stone into sharp tools. Language as we know it did not exist yet, but humans used gestures, sounds, and expressions to share meaning. A pointing finger could mean food there. A warning cry could mean danger near. Slowly, these simple signals grew into something more powerful, something that would one day separate humans from all other creatures: communication. But perhaps the greatest revolution came with fire. Fire was not always ours. In the beginning, humans feared it, watching from afar as lightning struck trees and flames devoured forests. But over time, they learned to steal it, keeping embers alive, carrying sparks from place to place. Fire gave warmth in cold nights, light in the darkness, and protection from predators. It made food safer, easier to chew, easier to digest. It allowed humans to gather together not just for survival, but for something more: connection. Around the fire, stories were born, the first sparks of culture glowing in the night. Tools, too, became lifelines. At first, humans used simple stones, sharp enough to cut meat or crack bones. Then they learned to shape them, striking flint against rock until the edges became blades. These tools opened new doors: hunting animals, cutting wood, scraping hides for clothing. Over generations, the tools became sharper, stronger, more specialized. With tools, humans no longer waited for predators to leave scraps behind. They began to hunt. Slowly, they transformed from scavengers into hunters, chasing antelope across the plains, setting traps, and working together to bring down prey larger than themselves. Yet even as they grew stronger, life remained uncertain. A broken leg could mean death, an infection could spread without medicine, and childbirth was dangerous for women. Every loss was felt deeply, not just in grief, but in survival. Every life mattered, because every life added strength to the group. That is why cooperation became our greatest weapon. Unlike lions or wolves, humans relied not just on muscle, but on minds. They learned to share knowledge, to pass down survival secrets, to teach the young. This bond, this instinct to help one another, became the seed of civilization. When we look back millions of years, it is tempting to think of our ancestors as primitive, weak, or simple. But the truth is far greater. They were resilient beyond imagination. They endured hunger that could last for days, danger that surrounded them constantly, and a world that gave no mercy. Yet they adapted, they invented, they survived where many could not. Without their courage, without their endurance, none of us would be here today. This was the beginning of humanity's story, the dawn of survival, the forging of strength in the fire of hardship. But this was only the first chapter. For as time passed, humans began to discover more than just survival. They began to explore, to create, to dream of something greater than fear and hunger. And in that search, they would change the world forever. But survival alone was never enough. As humans endured the endless struggle of life, something within them began to change. They were no longer only reacting to nature, they were shaping it. This was the turning point, the bridge between being mere survivors and becoming the architects of a future far beyond what any other creature had ever imagined. Picture the scene, a group of early humans standing on a vast plain at sunrise. The air is crisp, the grass wet with dew, and in the distance herds of animals move slowly across the land. These humans are not wandering blindly anymore. They have strategies. They plan their movements, track footprints in the soil, listen to the distant calls of prey. They are hunters now, not just gatherers. With sharpened spears of wood and stone, they approach cautiously, communicating silently through gestures. And when the moment comes, they strike together, chasing, trapping, and finally bringing down an animal many times their size. This victory is more than just a meal. It is proof that intelligence, teamwork, and patience can overcome brute strength. Hunting changed everything. It meant more reliable access to food, to protein, to fat, the fuel that powered the growth of the human brain. With every generation, brains grew larger, sharper, more capable. This intelligence gave humans an advantage no predator could match. Slowly, the balance of power shifted. Humans were no longer the weakest, they were becoming the cleverest. And with cleverness came innovation. Tools became more advanced. Fire was no longer borrowed from lightning but created with sparks struck between stones. Shelters grew stronger, built with branches, animal skins, and eventually bones of mammoths or other great beasts. Humans began to wear clothing, stitched from hides to protect against the freezing cold. No longer were they at the mercy of nature, they were learning to control it. Still, the world was dangerous. Imagine traveling with your group through a forest where every rustle could mean a predator. Imagine the constant fear of a snake bite, an infection, or a sudden storm. Death was always near, yet humans pressed forward. And in doing so, they discovered something remarkable: migration. They began to leave the lands of their birth, chasing new hunting grounds, following rivers, crossing mountains, moving further and further than any of their kind before them. This movement was not just survival. It was exploration, curiosity, and the beginning of humanity's journey across the globe. In these migrations, humans encountered challenges beyond anything they had faced before. Harsh deserts stretched endlessly under burning suns. Frozen tundras punished them with ice and snow. Dense jungles hid dangers in every shadow. Yet, with every obstacle, humans adapted. They learned to use the stars to guide their way, to carve rafts from wood to cross rivers, to discover which plants healed and which poisoned. Each environment forced new lessons, and each lesson strengthened the human spirit. But what truly set humans apart was not just their ability to survive, but their ability to imagine. Around campfires, after the day's struggles, they did not sit in silence. They began to share sounds, gestures, and eventually words. Language grew, slowly but steadily, transforming from simple warnings into complex stories. These stories carried knowledge, Where to find food, how to build a tool, which animals to fear, when the seasons would change. Stories also carried dreams, dreams of ancestors, spirits, forces of nature that could not be seen but felt. From this imagination came the first sparks of belief, the roots of religion, and the sense that life was not only survival, but something meaningful. Art was born in this world of survival and wonder. In the darkness of caves, humans painted with ochre and charcoal, creating shapes of animals, hunters, and symbols whose meanings are still mysteries today. These paintings were not decoration. They were expressions of identity, a way to pass stories beyond words, a way to connect with something greater. Imagine a child thousands of years ago running his hand across a cave wall, seeing the images left by ancestors long gone. In that moment, history itself was alive, memory carved into stone. As time moved forward, groups grew larger. Cooperation became more complex. Leadership appeared, with the strongest or the wisest guiding others. Families linked with families, forming tribes. Tribes learned to trade, food, tools, knowledge. Slowly, the bonds of community strengthened, and with them, the beginnings of culture. Humans were no longer only surviving day to day, they were building a shared future. Yet nature was relentless. Ice ages swept across the earth, forcing humans to endure unimaginable cold. Entire species disappeared, leaving hunger and desperation in their absence. But humans endured. They discovered new ways to trap animals, new plants to eat, new shelters to build. In fire and frost, storm and drought, they refused to give up. This resilience became humanity's defining trait, the ability not just to live, but to adapt to whatever the earth demanded. And perhaps the greatest truth is this: deep within us, those instincts still remain. The same fire that burned in their hearts, the same will to endure, the same desire to connect, to dream, to build, it all lives in us. We carry their story in our blood, their courage in our bones. Millions of years may separate us, but in every heartbeat, we are still the children of those who once walked barefoot across wild lands, looked into the eyes of predators, and chose not to give up. That is how humans lived. That is why we are here. And that is why their story will never be forgotten.